all, Carpetbagger here, coming to you live from the west, more specifically Riverton, Wyoming, and I am at the Wind River Heritage Center. This is from my understanding, this is a taxidermy and wax museum that I've been very excited to take a look at. Of course, I always love visiting different museums of taxidermy. I love wax museums. This seems to be a perfect museum combination, so please follow me. And here is the Wax Museum of Old Wyoming. This wax museum has actually moved around quite a bit. It was originally in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, was moved to the city of Thermopolis, and then finally, just a couple years ago, was moved here to its current location in Riverton. There's a mixing of taxidermy and waxidermy. A Native American riding a horse right there. Here we have Lewis and Clark, along with their Native American guide, Sacagawea. It looks like she's got a baby and that papoose on her back. And here is explorer Jebediah Smith, actually the basis for the character Jebediah Springfield from The Simpsons. He actually was mauled by a bear, like Jebediah Springfield said that he would wear a hat to cover up the bear scars on his head. This here is Captain Benjamin L.E. Bonneville. This is Father Pierre Smet. Apparently he was known for converting Native Americans to Christianity. These two Native Americans here. He's talking to them, telling them about the Bible, showing them his rosaries. Got a black bear back there. And we got this big old canoe. What I find really interesting is it actually has a miniature cannon mounted on the front. I did not know that canoes could be armed. Look at that, they got all these pelts and furs. We've got a grizzly bear pelt there. This gentleman is simply notated as being a typical mountain man. I guess this is the most average looking a mountain man can possibly be. There's a famed mountain man, Cactus Jack Ratcliffe, not to be confused with the pro wrestler Cactus Jack. General John Fremont, apparently he played a big part in the Oregon Trail in expanding the United States out west. Another famed mountain explorer, Kit Carson. This is Jim Bridger. It's one of the most famous mountain men there is, but unfortunately one of his biggest claims of fame is leaving Hugh Glass to die when he was 17 years old after Hugh Glass had been mauled by a bear. Apparently he did make up for it with a life of contributions to mountaineering. I just wonder why we don't get a wax figure of Hugh Glass. He's nowhere to be found here. This is famed trapper Thomas Fitzpatrick, and if you look down, you can see that he has some damage to his hand. Now one may think that may just be a wax figure being broken, as they often do. A lot of times they get their fingers snapped off, but that's actually by design. His nickname was Broken Hand, as he had several of his fingers chopped off by Native Americans. Now this is pretty intense. This is Shoshone Indian chief Washakie. And apparently, to avoid a battle between their two tribes, he challenged another chief, Red Robber, to a one-on-one fight. They engaged in mortal combat so that they could avoid a war. Just have the two of them fight and to settle things. Which, that sounds like a great idea. We should use that in wars. Just have the leaders of the countries fight each other to avoid a full war. But as an extra bonus, after he killed Red Robber, he tore out his heart. You can see the heart there on the end of that spear, and he actually would eat his heart. So yeah, a real life Mortal Kombat fatality there. Here's the Laramie Peace Treaty. These are 3 heads of different Native American tribes as they were being talked into signing a peace treaty. And I don't know all the backstory, but I know these sort of things ended up not working out all that well for Native Americans. And here we have Brigham Young, one of the most important figures in Mormon history, saying he was run out of Illinois and basically pushed back all the way to Salt Lake City, which he remains a very important figure in the Mormon Church and a very controversial figure to some. And this scene here shows how Mormons were transported out west for the right to practice their religion freely. You can see the man actually pulling a handcart with his family back there. It's a recreation of a landmark split rock. See the little mountain goat taking a peek at it. And down here we have a little jackalope prancing amongst the bushes. Just there on the fence post it says watching. And if you look very carefully through the corn, there is some Native Americans peering at us. Now here is a pretty gruesome scene. This is the lynching of Ellen Watson and Jim Averill. Apparently this happened over a land dispute. I guess these gentlemen here were upset that they were homesteading on some of their land. So they ended up accusing them of cattle rustling and ended up hanging them. And then apparently to try to defend themselves later, they tried to besmirch the good name of Ellen Watson, claiming she was an outlaw by the name of Cattle Kate, who was a prostitute and a murderer. But apparently most of that was pretty much false and just a way to smear her good name and justify this horrific execution. In this little jail here we have the Butch Cassidy gang right there. Little peek. It says the Wild Bunch, the last of the old-time outlaws. Here is Lieutenant Casper Collins. He was a military man that was murdered by Native Americans. Apparently he was attacked by 2,000 Native Americans who mutilated his body, cut off his scalp, and gouged out his eyes. Luckily, they're showing him in wax before that happened. Then we have George Custer, famous for trying to drive out Native Americans and losing and being killed. Now this is Buffalo Bill Cody, and I thought I knew who he was. Apparently he had made the famous Buffalo Bill Wild West show where he traveled around the world putting on a show that had gunfighting and horse riding and all that sort of fun stuff. But here in the museum they're talking about an incident that I was not familiar with. It's actually pretty awful. He actually murdered this Indian here, this Native American by the name of Yellow Hair. Yellow Hair fought General Custer and was involved in the Battle of Little Bighorn, and apparently Buffalo Bill Cody actually just tracked him down and murdered him just because he wanted to get some revenge for Custer. So he just found a Native American that just happened to be at the Battle of Little Bighorn and murdered him in cold blood. I must say, on this date, my opinion of Buffalo Bill Cody definitely has been altered. Also, he actually killed over 4,000 bison personally, so maybe he's not such a great guy. This is Esther Morris. She was a suffragette, saying that she was able to get a suffragette bill pushed through the state legislature in 1869, which is really early when you look at the history of women's rights. That's another interesting person I did not know about. This is Nellie Taylor Ross. She was the first ever female governor, the governor of Wyoming, in 1924. So very early on, was made governor of a state, the first woman to ever be governor of a state. That's absolutely amazing. Who knew Wyoming was so forward with women's rights? Now this here is probably the craziest story in all of Wyoming. This is Big Nose George Parrott, who's an outlaw, a very, very nasty, mean outlaw who was hung. And probably the strangest part is after his death, this is Dr. John Osborne, who did the autopsy, the after the hanging observation of George. But for some reason, and I still can't understand why, Dr. Osborne, he cut off the top of George's skull, gave it to his medical assistant, who would use it as an ashtray, and then he would strip off pieces of George's skin, have them tanned like leather. He'd make shoes and a medical bag out of them, and then take the rest of George's corpse and shove them in a barrel, which was found decades later. Now the shoes are actually still on display at another museum here in Wyoming. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get a chance to get out to, but I'd love to see them at some point. The Dr. Osborne, though, he would later run for governor, and at his inauguration he would wear the shoes made from Big Nose George's skin. Now Big Nose George was a horrible man. He did murder people. He was a cattle thief, but man, that was brutal. And one of my favorite presidents, Teddy Roosevelt, here they're kind of recounting the story of the teddy bear, where he was brought a sick baby bear in order for him to shoot it. And he said that's not very sporting. He wasn't going to just shoot a sick baby. He would rather hunt healthy bears. But the media had a field day with it. He became associated with little baby bears, and which eventually led to the creation of the still popular teddy bear. This is Charles M. Russell. He's an artist here in Wyoming. You can see him here painting. On the walls we can see some examples of his artwork. Apparently this is the one that first got him noticed. This is Thomas Edison, of all people. Was not expecting to see him in a museum on Wyoming. Apparently the story is he came out to Wyoming to observe a solar eclipse. While I was out here, he decided to do a little fishing. Look down there and see the delicious bass. And while he was fishing, his pole cracked. You can see some cracks in his fishing pole. And the fibers, he realized, were flammable, and that gave him the idea for the filament inside the light bulb. Now that is fascinating. Here we have a miner panning for gold. All this taxidermy here was from one man's collection. Most of these were shot by the same hunter, a man by the name of Jake Coral. See these bighorn sheep right here. See the different animal traps right there. This one was actually a man trap meant to catch poachers. You can see the cowboy boot with that bone sticking out of it. See the tiny little fox right there. Chaos Reigns' little buddy. See this pair of lynx here chasing that poor little bunny. Of course, we all know in the battle between the vicious and the adorable, the vicious always wins. See the different coyotes there? 3 different colors of coyote. There's a mountain lion leaping at that deer right there. There's a antelope right there. Little family of raccoons. And then chipmunk rowing a canoe. So rattlesnakes there. Big white wolf. It says Brutus. Apparently he was a nuisance bear that would get into campsites and get into people's cabins. So he was hunted down by the Forestry Service. See the salmon down there. Is that a little beaver maybe? No, muskrat. Definitely a muskrat. There's the beavers over there. Big old moose right there. These right here are wolverines. You know, the namesake of the X-Men, but they're really just big, mean skunks. We have more traps, all sorts of different kinds of animal traps. A mouse trap right there. Remember that? My grandpa used to use those to hunt I think gophers in his yard. I dropped the spike down on the poor little gopher. Oh wow, not sure what that is. So thank you for joining me here at the Windy River Heritage Center, which contains both the Wax Museum of Old Wyoming, which it is so good to see a wax museum staying alive. This wax museum dodged a few bullets. It was in Jackson Hole, that closed down. It was in Thermopolis, that closed down, but then it finally found a nice permanent home here in Riverton, Wyoming. And also they have a massive collection of taxidermy, as you saw. So taxidermy and wax figures go together like peanut butter and jelly as far as I'm concerned. So definitely check this out if you are in the area. If you'd like to see other places I've been, please check the interactive map in the description of this video. It'll show you all the different places I've been, and you can tell me where I need to go next. Also, if you'd like to help support the channel, there's several ways to do that in the description of this video. Consider buying an enamel pin. I now have 2 different varieties. If you'd like to donate to Patreon, $3 or more, we'll get you a postcard once a month. Until next time, this one's in the bag.